Imagine you wake up tomorrow and you cannot work. Not sick, not tired. I mean truly physically, completely unable. What would happen? Not to your career, not to your finances. I'm asking something more fundamental. What would happen to you, to your sense of who you are, to the way you understand your own value in the world? If you cannot immediately answer that question, if there is even a second of hesitation, then this video is for you. Because his is a truth that most people only discover when it's too late. You have built your entire identity around what you do, not who you are, what you do, and you did it so gradually, so completely, that you stopped noticing the difference. In 1915, a man named Franz Kafka published a short novella called The Metamorphosis. You may have read it in school. You probably remember the premise. A man wakes up transformed into a giant insect. But here is what no one told you about that story. The transformation is not the tragedy. The tragedy is the first thought Gregor Samsa has when he realizes what has happened to him. He does not scream. He does not pray. He does not think of his family, or his loved ones, or his own life. He thinks about being late for work. Kafka wrote that sentence in 1915, and it describes something that is more true about modern life today than it was then. This video is not a literature class. This video is a mirror, and what it shows may be the most uncomfortable thing you have looked at in a long time. Franz Kafka was not a happy man. He worked in an insurance office. He spent his days processing workers' compensation claims, verifying that the laborer who lost his hand in a factory machine had actually lost it at work, not somewhere more convenient for his own fabricated story. He did this to protect the profit margins of companies that were already profitable. He hated every moment of it, and he was apparently very good at it. In his private journals, he described the office with a despair so precise it borders on comedy. He described it as something that consumed him from the inside out, that left him with just enough energy to get home, and not enough to do the one thing that actually mattered to him: write. But what Kafka saw from his desk at that insurance office was something that most people around him were too comfortable or too scared to name. He saw the machinery. Not metaphorically, literally, he watched human beings function as components in a system that had no interest in them as people. A system that valued them precisely and only for their output. And he watched what happened when that output stopped. The worker who could no longer work was no longer a worker, and in that system, a worker who is no longer a worker was nothing. Nothing, not a person with a history, not someone's father or son or friend, a broken component. Something to be accounted for, processed and moved past. Kafka watched this happen to real people every day, and then he came home and wrote The Metamorphosis. The insect is not a symbol of disease or madness. The insect is the symbol of what a human being looks like to a system that can no longer use them. Now think about your own life. Think about the last time you were genuinely proud of yourself. Not proud because someone else told you that you should be actually proud. Chest forward, no apology. This is real kind of proud. What was it about? Was it something you created? Something you felt? A moment of genuine connection with another person? Or was it a promotion? A number on a screen? A title that changed? A deliverable someone approved of? I'm not asking this to judge you. I'm asking because the answer reveals something important about which world you are living in. Kafka's world is not the past. It is the present, dressed in better clothes. But to understand how deeply this has affected you, you need to meet Gregor Samsa properly. Not as a character in a story, as a version of yourself. Let me tell you about Gregor Samsa before the transformation. He was a traveling salesman. He worked constantly. He was the sole financial support of his entire family, his parents, his sister. They depended on him completely. And he knew it. He carried that knowledge the way some people carry a physical weight. He did not particularly love his job. That detail matters. Kafka makes it clear from the very first pages. Gregor found his work exhausting, dehumanizing, the kind of labor that grinds a person down to function. But he did it every day without complaint, because that is what he was for. Notice that phrase, what he was for, not who he was. Gregor's entire identity, his sense of worth, his relationship to his family, his understanding of his own place in the world was built on a single foundation: his ability to bring money home. He was not a son who was also a worker. He was a worker who happened to live with his family. That distinction may sound subtle. It is not. And then one morning, without warning, without reason, without explanation, he woke up as an insect. Kafka describes the scene with an almost clinical precision: the enormous body, the difficulty moving, the strange new sensations, and then Gregor's very first conscious thought: what has happened to me? And then, concern about getting to work on time. Not what is happening to my body. Not am I dying. Not how do I tell my family. The first extended thought Gregor has in the body of a giant insect is about his job. Kafka is showing you something with this, something brutal and specific. Gregor Samsa is so completely identified with his function that even in the most extreme crisis a human body could experience, his mind defaults to work. Not because he loves work, because work is the only language his identity knows how to speak. When you strip away the salesman, the provider, the reliable one, there is nothing left to fall back on. No inner life. No separate identity, no self that exists independently of its usefulness. Now here's the question you need to sit with. If you could no longer do your job tomorrow, if you could not work, could not produce, could not contribute in the way you currently do, who would you be? There's a pattern that runs through the lives of millions of people. It is so normalized that most people never notice it. It is so rewarded by the world around us that it feels like health when it is actually illness. I call it the Gregor Condition. The Gregor Condition is this: the complete replacement of personal identity with professional function. It is not workaholism. Workaholism is an addiction, a compulsive behavior that the person often recognizes as excessive. The Gregor Condition is something quieter and more complete. It is not that you work too much, it is that you have stopped having a self that exists separately from your work. Your work is not what you do, your work is what you are, and the difference between those two sentences is the difference between a life and a function. How does the Gregor Condition develop? It does not happen overnight. It is the product of decades of conditioning. From the time you were a child, the world around you asked one question in 1,000 different forms. What are you going to be when you grow up? Not, who are you going to be? What are you going to be? What function will you serve? What role will you fill? What will you contribute to the machine? And you answered over and over. For years you answered. And with every answer you reinforced the idea that your identity was something you earned through output, not something you simply had. Then you entered the workforce, and the reward system became explicit: perform well, and you receive validation, money, status, respect. The people who perform best are the most admired. The people who cannot perform are pitied, dismissed, made invisible. So you performed better and better. And with every performance, a little more of the boundary between you and your function dissolved, until one day, maybe gradually, maybe in a single moment of terrible clarity, you realized that you did not know how to be still. You did not know how to rest without feeling guilty. You did not know how to take a vacation without checking your phone. You did not know how to answer, "How are you?" without talking about work. You did not know how to feel valuable on a Saturday afternoon when nothing was getting done, because nothing about you existed independently of your function. The philosopher Byung-Chul described this from the systemic side. He wrote that the 21st century did not need the threat of punishment to extract labor from its subjects. It found something far more efficient. It convinced us to become our own oppressors. The society of performance does not need a boss standing over you with a whip. It has turned the whip into an internal voice. The voice that wakes you up at 3 a.m. with anxiety about the email you forgot to send. The voice that makes rest feel like failure. The voice that asks every quiet moment whether you're doing enough. That voice is not you. That is the machine running inside you. And you have been mistaking it for your conscience, your entire adult life. But here's the cruelest part of the Gregor Condition. And this is the part Kafka understood that no productivity guru will ever tell you. It is not just what it does to you, it is what it reveals about the people around you. This is where it gets truly uncomfortable. After Gregor transforms, his family's reaction unfolds in stages. At first they are shocked, then frightened, then inconvenienced, then resentful, then, and this is the part that Kafka writes with a coldness that is almost surgical, relieved when it is over. His father, who had been living off Gregor's income for years, immediately begins to view the insect with contempt. He throws apples at it. He attacks it. The man who accepted his son's support without question turns on him the moment that support becomes impossible. His mother cannot even bring herself to look at him. His sister, who initially takes care of him, eventually delivers the sentence that ends Gregor's will to live. She says, with the weariness of someone who has been carrying a burden too long, we must try to get rid of it. Not him. The transformation from he to it is the moment Kafka identifies as the true death, not the physical one that follows. The moment Gregor's family stops seeing him as a person and starts seeing him as a problem. And why? Not because he became dangerous, not because he stopped loving them, but because he stopped being useful. Now I need you to hear what I'm about to say very carefully. I'm not saying the people in your life don't love you. I'm asking you to look honestly at the conditions under which that love operates. Think about the relationships in your life. Think about the people who express the most pride in you. When do they do it? When you achieve something, when you produce something, when you succeed. Think about the conversations you have with the people closest to you. How much of your self-worth in those conversations is tied to what you're doing, what you're working on, what you're building? Now imagine calling those same people and saying, I have nothing to report. I'm not working on anything. I'm not achieving anything. I'm just here. I'm enough just as I am. How does that feel? Does it feel true, or does it feel terrifying? Because here's what the Gregor condition does to relationships, and this is the part that no one talks about openly. When your identity is entirely built on your function, you unconsciously attract and sustain relationships that are built on the same logic, relationships where you are valued for what you provide, not for who you are. Relationships where your worth is contingent on your output. Not because the people around you are cruel, but because you trained them. You showed them consistently over years that you were most present, most available, most lovable when you were producing, and they learned to respond accordingly. Gregor Samsa did not become worthless when he turned into an insect. His family's love was always conditional. The transformation simply removed the condition and revealed the truth underneath. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps and rebuilt his psychology from the ruins of that experience, wrote, "Each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life." What Frankl understood, what the camps stripped away every illusion about, is that a human being has value that is not earned, not derived from function, not contingent on output, a value that exists simply because they exist. The Gregor condition makes this unbelievable. It makes the idea of unconditional worth feel naive, or lazy, or dangerous. That is how deep the conditioning goes. By now you may be feeling something uncomfortable, not because this is new information. Exactly. Part of you has known this for a long time. You have felt the hollowness that comes after a major achievement. You have noticed the anxiety that arrives on the first day of a vacation. You have had the 3 a.m. moments when you wonder whether any of this is actually what you want. You have known, and you have continued anyway. Why? This is the part that self-help content never addresses honestly, because the honest answer is not flattering, and flattery is good for engagement. The honest answer is this: the Gregor condition is not just a trap, it is also a shelter. When your identity is your function, you never have to answer the harder question. You never have to sit in the silence and ask, who am I when I strip away everything I do? What do I actually feel? What do I actually want? What am I actually afraid of? Work fills the space where those questions live. Productivity is the most socially acceptable form of avoidance ever invented. You can spend an entire lifetime running from yourself at full speed and receive praise for it every step of the way. There is something else. The Gregor condition gives you something that feels like control. As long as you're performing, as long as the output continues, you're safe, you're valuable. You're protected from the terrifying possibility that you might not be enough if you just existed. Stopping means risking that discovery, and for many people that risk feels more dangerous than continuing to disappear. Kafka understood this too. He wrote about it in his journals, not in the story. He described his own paralysis, the way he could see exactly what was happening to him and still could not stop it. My condition is not unhappiness, but it is also not happiness, not indifference, not weakness, not fatigue. It is the precise center of the target. The precise center of the target, suspended in perfect, awful clarity. That is not weakness. That is the human condition when it comes face to face with its own conditioning. And the first step, the only first step that has ever actually worked, is not a productivity system or a morning routine or a new framework. It is the willingness to stop pretending that the function is the person, not forever. Not in a way that requires you to burn your career to the ground tomorrow morning. Just stop pretending for long enough to hear the voice underneath. The one that has been trying to speak to you through the anxiety and the restlessness and the hollowness you feel after every achievement. That voice is not a problem to be solved. It is not a weakness to be managed. It is you. The you that has been waiting for you to notice it was there. Gregor Samsa dies. That is how Kafka ends it. Not with a redemption arc. Not with a family that finally sees him. He simply stops eating, stops moving, and one morning the cleaning woman finds a dried out insect corpse in the corner of the room. His family, Kafka notes, feels relief. They take a tram ride together to the countryside. The sun is shining. His sister stretches and feels young and full of promise. Life continues. Kafka does not let you feel good about this. He's not trying to. But I want to tell you something about that ending that most readings miss. Gregor Samsa's tragedy is not that he was transformed, it is that the transformation happened too late. By the time the insect forced the truth into the open, by the time his function became literally impossible, there was nothing left of him to build from. He had given everything to the machine. There was no reserve, no inner world, no selfhood that had been quietly cultivated while the work happened. When the work stopped, there was nothing there. The question Kafka is really asking, the question underneath the absurdist horror, is not, what if you woke up as an insect? The question is, what would be left of you if you couldn't work anymore? And unlike Gregor, you're asking it now, before the transformation, while there is still time to answer it honestly. Viktor Frankl, who lost everything, his wife, his manuscripts, his freedom, his world, and survived, wrote that the last of human freedoms is the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Not the circumstances, the attitude toward them. You cannot always choose what happens to you. You cannot always choose whether the system values you today or discards you tomorrow. You cannot always choose when the insect arrives. But you can choose right now to begin building the part of yourself that no system can take. Not by quitting your job, not by burning your career. By beginning small, consistently, without drama, to invest in the inner life that has been waiting, the relationship with yourself that does not depend on output, the interests that have no return on investment, the silence you have been filling with noise because you are afraid of what you would hear in it, the questions you have been avoiding because the answers might require something of you. Kafka died at 40 years old, never having published a novel in his lifetime. He asked his friend Max Brod to burn everything he had written. Max Brod did not. And 100 years later, Kafka's insect is still showing us ourselves. That is what the inner life does. It outlasts the function, it outlasts the system, it outlasts everything the machine can take, but only if you build it. Tell me in the comments, and I want you to be honest. More honest than you would be out loud. If you could not work tomorrow, who would you be? Because the moment you can answer that question without panic, that is the moment Gregor's story stops being yours.